Today, my travels have brought me to a very small rural town in northern Alabama. As you can see, I have Bella with me. And Oakville, Alabama, it's a small, very small rural farming community. And its claim to fame comes in the form of a man. In 1936, that man, Jesse Owens, he made history in the 1936 Olympic Games in Berlin, Germany. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Jesse Owens and the things that he had to overcome to compete in those 1936 Olympic Games head-to-head with Adolf Hitler. Plus, an irregular note, this video today is sponsored. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a history buff. I love history. So this one should be pretty interesting. Today we are on our way back home, and we just happened to see that along the way was the birthplace of Jesse Owens, and they had like a Jesse Owens Park and visitor center and all of that stuff, and that we just decided to stop and check it out. Thought it'd be pretty cool. They got the Olympic rings on the gate. Oakville community. Looks like they had some statues of Jesse Owens or something out here at one point that are no longer here. Jesse Owens, all-time track great, 1913 to 1980. He inspired a world enslaved in tyranny and brought hope to his fellow man. From the cotton fields of Oakville to the acclaim of the entire world, he made us all proud to be called Lawrence Countians. Back here on the back of the property, they have an actual museum, the Jesse Owens Museum, with the Olympic flag up there. This looks like it's some kind of torch that is burnt. So this is "May this light shine forever." So a replica of the 1936 Olympic torch. So it's a replica of the torch that was in Germany, and seems like they would have it normally lit. You can see the burn marks up there, but it's not going right now. That's just right outside of the Jesse Owens Museum. They have a long jump back here where you can practice your long jump skills. It's the size of the 1936 Olympic long jump. So close. Right here in the center of this little park is a giant statue of Jesse Owens with the Olympic rings around him. That's so cool. Olympic champion. As I said in the intro to this video is a first today because it is actually sponsored. And I have to give a huge shout out to the sponsors of this video today, My Patriot Supply. I'm sure by now all of you have gone to the grocery stores and you've seen that the shelves were empty. And it's because of these global food shortages that a lot of people are feeling uncertain about the future. There's no better way to be prepared than by having long-term food emergency storage kits. Whether you're currently not prepared or even if you already purchased from Ready Hour or My Patriot Supply, you can go to prepwithbamamike.com and you can save right now $150 on a 3-month emergency food kit. You'll get meals for breakfast, lunch, dinners, drink mixes, snacks, the works, and then you'll be prepared for when the unthinkable happens. Again, if you go to prepwithbamamike.com and maybe you're not interested in a 3-month supply, you can click on that My Patriot Supply link in the top left corner and you will get full access to their entire website using my discount that they created for my subscribers, and you'll have a pick of the litter. You can choose whatever you want. like I said, I have to give a huge shout out to My Patriot Supply for sponsoring this video today. Again, that's prepwithbamamike.com, and you'll be ready for any emergency. Now, Jesse Owens and Adolf Hitler, those are two names that just about everyone in the world has heard of before. And today, while we're visiting the spot where greatness was born, I'm going to tell that whole story of their paths crossing in those 1936 Olympic Games, and how Jesse Owens embarrassed Adolf Hitler in his hometown in Berlin. Jesse Owens was born right here in Oakville, Alabama in 1913 as James Cleveland Owens, but he went by J.C. At age 7, Owens went to work in his parents' crop fields out all around out here where this park is now, working very long hours every day. Back here in the back corner, this is the home that Jesse Owens was born in and grew up in until he was 9.
The family lived here for many years as sharecropper family. In
They got an audio thing.
The family moved to Cleveland, Ohio.
1922, they moved to Cleveland, Ohio.
Until I was 13, and my brother Jess was 9. Our house had 3 rooms.
Unfortunately, the museum, the house, everything is closed today because it's a weekend. But it's okay. It's just really cool to be able to see all this. Jesse Owens was born right here in this shack, and he lived here until he was 9, and then they moved to Cleveland, Ohio. They were looking for a better life, so they moved to Cleveland, trying to get a better life. And it was there that Jesse enrolled in grade school, and a teacher there asked his name. He told her JC in his strong southern accent, but she misheard him, and she wrote down Jesse, which stuck with him, and from that point on, he was known as Jesse Owens. 1931 is a key year in the story in all of this. Over in Germany, the country was impoverished and inflated and in disarray from the First World War, which led the way for a radical new political party to form called the Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party, with a politically inexperienced leader at the helm of it named Adolf Hitler. At the same time, here in the United States in 1931, Jesse Owens enrolled at Ohio State University, and at that time America was segregated, and very few African Americans could afford to go to college. Ohio State didn't offer scholarships for track and field athletes, so Jesse wound up having to work 3 jobs as an elevator operator and a shoe shine and as a gas station attendant to not only pay for his school tuition, but to also help support his family. And because Ohio State was segregated at the time, Jesse wasn't even allowed to live on campus during any of this. He couldn't even eat in the dining hall with his other teammates, despite Jesse being the team's captain at that time. In 1933, the World Olympic Committee decided that the 11th Olympiad, the 1936 Summer Olympics, they were going to be held in Berlin, Germany. Adolf Hitler, who was pretty much in charge of the country at that point, at first he didn't like that idea, but his propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, convinced him that they could put on a giant spectacle and they could show the world that the German Aryan race was the most dominant and most superior race in the entire world. And Hitler fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. And from this point on, the 1936 Summer Olympics were known as Hitler's Games. It was at this point, both Jesse Owens and Adolf Hitler's path, they were destined to cross. By this point in 1933, like I said, Hitler had completely taken over Germany, and all non-Nazi political parties, organizations, and labor unions, they had all been eradicated by Hitler. Hitler's ideologies began to take hold throughout the country, and all non-whites and Jewish people were considered undesirable and they were portrayed as inferior and degenerate. All German magazines and German sports imagery all promoted Hitler's Aryan racial superiority, and only Aryans could be on posters or in magazines and newspapers across the country of Germany. The Nazi sports office ordered that all public sports nationwide were only to allow Aryans to participate. And this Aryan-only policy, once it got out to the world that this was going on, it sparked outrage and protest from all over the world. At this same time, Jesse Owens at Ohio State, he was breaking world records and drawing attention for how fast he could run on the track. In Jesse's junior year at Ohio State, in one meet in just a 45-minute time period, Jesse broke 3 world records, earning his spot on the U.S. Olympic team. In response to the reports of the persecution of Jewish and non-white people in Germany, the U.S. Olympic Committee questioned the morality of competing in those 1936 Summer Olympic Games. The chairman of the U.S. Olympic Committee was invited to Berlin to see their sports facilities for himself. So the Nazis effectively put a hold on their, non-Aryan persecutions. They cleaned up any anti-Jewish propaganda, and they brought in a handful of Jewish athletes under the threat of death if they let on to the American what was really going on. That U.S. committee chairman fell for it, and he came back to America and told the world that the Jewish athletes in Germany were being treated fairly. The mainstream media in the United States, they went on to ask those African-American athletes who were going to the Olympics how they felt about the persecution of Jewish people. And the group of them, including Jesse Owens, they simply responded, "How are we supposed to boycott the persecution of Jewish people in Germany when we're being treated that exact same way here in America?" And it was on. America was officially going to Germany for those 1936 Olympics. So all of America's Olympic athletes, they boarded the ocean liner, the SS Manhattan, for the 10-day journey across the ocean to Germany. Prior to Hitler's Olympics, the Olympics wasn't a massive deal at all. It didn't get a lot of notoriety, and it was never obviously televised or anything like that, so a lot of people didn't even know about it. The Nazis, though, they were all into propaganda and making things seem bigger than they really were. So Hitler and Goebbels, they devised a massive celebration to showcase their Aryan superiority, and it would all start with an opening ceremony, just like what you see into today's Olympics, in the modern Olympics. That inception of that opening ceremony came from the Nazis in the 1936 Olympics. And something else that you may not know, the Nazis also conceptualized the running of the torch. In 36, it started in Greece, where the very first Olympics began, and they carried it all the way to the brand new Olympic Stadium in Berlin. And that torch run was also introduced by the Nazis in 1936, and it is something that is also still done to this day, but they just make it seem like it was a Greek tradition, but really it was started by the Nazis. During the opening ceremonies for those Olympics, the Nazis included what they called a review march, where all the different countries could walk around the track and they could nod their flags and they could show their respect to Adolf Hitler for hosting this grand showcase. Each country could either give the Nazi salute, which was like, straight out, or they could give the Olympic salute, which was out to the side. So they were very, very similar, but different. Right away, the U.S. threw Hitler into a tizzy by not doing either of those salutes. They didn't nod the American flag when they walked around, and instead of giving any kind of salute, they just placed their hands and their hats over their heart like we do for our national anthem. That's what they did as they were walking around the track, and it just infuriated Hitler. The actual sports competition started on the next day, on August the 1st of 1936. Hitler wound up having a great first day, and Germany won a bunch of medals. Hitler came down and he met with and shook hands with all the medal winners from that first day. It was day 2, however. Things would start turning awry for Hitler, and he wouldn't have the Aryan triumph that he had hoped for. On day 2, Jesse Owens competed. Jesse Owens wound up winning 4 gold medals within the 2 weeks of the 1936 Olympics, including a gold medal in the crucial 100-meter dash, the winner of which typically gets the title of the world's fastest man. And on top of that 100-meter dash, Jesse Owens also brought home the gold in the 200-meter dash, the 4x100 relay race, and the long jump. Jesse Owens became the first African American to win 4 gold medals at a single Olympic Games. Reports quickly emerged that Hitler became irate with every Owens win. Hitler slammed his fist and he cursed out loudly as he watched Jesse Owens destroy his German Aryan athletes. In the long jump competition, Jesse was having a little bit of trouble. He wasn't quite used to the European rules, which were just a tad different. So it appeared as if he might actually get disqualified. But Jesse got help from an unlikely source when Jesse's fiercest competitor, the German long jumper named Lutz Long, he came over to Jesse and gave him some advice. He told him to throw his towel down just a few inches back from the jumping spot, and Jesse took his advice and he threw that towel down a few inches back and he jumped, and Jesse Owens went on to beat Lutz Long in the finals, sending Hitler into an absolute rage. Hitler wound up leaving the arena after that, claiming to have a doctor's appointment just to get out of shaking hands with this African-American hero who had just destroyed his Aryan athletes and who had just embarrassed Hitler, who had been going around touting his superior race would win everything. And also, on another side note, Hitler, he was already furious over Jesse beating all of his Nazi athletes. And what actually sent him over the edge was later on in the day, a German athlete named Dora Ratjen, who was competing in the women's high jump. Dora was pretty much guaranteed to win coming into the event, but she didn't. She came in 4th place, and the Führer thought she was an absolute shoo-in to win, and that's what sent him over the edge that evening. This Dora Ratjen not coming in first. A few years after the Olympics took place, this women's high jumper, she was revealed to be a man named Heinrich Ratjen. Originally in that spot in the Olympics, there was a Jewish woman, and all Jewish and non-white athletes were banned, so they replaced her with this man, Heinrich Ratjen, and they had him dress up as a woman and enter the event to try and get an advantage on the other women. Well, he had to keep up this appearance of a woman for some time after the Olympics to avoid anyone finding out. And he was on a train one day when a worker on a train called the police and reported a suspicious man dressed up as a woman. And the police came and they actually took him to a hospital, and it caused this whole ruse to unravel. Now, obviously, that has nothing to do with Jesse Owens, but it's just an interesting side note for the 1936 Olympics that not many people know about. I thought I would throw in there. When those 1936 Olympics ended in Berlin, Hitler's Nazi athletes, they had racked up more medals than any other country, and they won those Olympics. But Hitler's perfect race theory had been destroyed by Jesse Owens and the 17 other African-American athletes that competed in those Olympics. It visibly disturbed Hitler, so as soon as the Olympics ended, Hitler's propaganda increased tenfold to try to recover this image that he was trying to put out of his Aryan race superiority. The world had no way of knowing at that point, though, just 2 years from the end of those Olympics, Hitler would go on to start World War II.
20 years ago, firing ceased. 20 years ago, a rejoicing world saw the end of its most terrible carnage. Today, people are again plagued by unsound theories, the desire for conquest. Again, the world is offered the false idea that might makes right.
responsibility lies on the shoulders of one man. By his latest act of naked aggression, Hitler has committed a crime not only against Poland, but against the whole human race.
Jesse Owens came back home after his incredible Olympic performance as a hero, but he was still a black man in 1930s America. So he came home to still have to battle racism and segregation, and even with his new celebrity status, he was denied access to hotels and restaurants and these type things. He didn't get the hometown hero celebration that he deserved. President Franklin D. Roosevelt very publicly invited the white athletes to the White House for a celebration, but even though Jesse was the star of the show, he wasn't invited because of his color. And because President Roosevelt, who was a Democrat, he was afraid of losing the support from Southern Democrats if he invited an African American to the White House. Franklin D. Roosevelt, he never acknowledged any of the 18 American athletes. He never sent any of them a letter or a telegram or anything. And Jesse Owens never forgot this, and he held a grudge for a very, very long time. Jesse Owens publicly aligned himself with conservatives, with Republicans, for all future elections in the United States just because of Roosevelt's betrayal. In 1953, President Dwight Eisenhower hired Jesse as a goodwill ambassador, and Jesse was able to travel all over the world teaching exercise and promoting American freedom. And then in 1972, Jesse Owens again returned to Berlin, to the site of his greatest triumph, the spot where he got under Adolf Hitler's skin in the 1936 Olympics. That year in 72, the Summer Olympics were being held in Munich, which was pretty close by, and Jesse was invited by the German Chancellor at that time to come and tour the empty stadium where those 1936 Olympics were held. It was televised, and they did a whole thing with Jesse standing there where he had that moment at. Jesse Owens died 8 years later in 1980 at the age of 66 from lung cancer. Since then, Jesse's achievements are finally being recognized by the history books, and he's getting streets named after him, and at Ohio State they named a stadium after him. He's getting statues and monuments and presidential medals and all of these things, but Jesse never got to see most of them. Jesse Owens was destined for greatness from a very early age, and it's amazing to think that it all started right here in a small rural town in North Alabama. Oakville, Alabama is where it all began. That is going to do it for this video today on Jesse Owens in the 1936 Olympics. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you're new here, go down, hit that subscribe button, then hit that notification bell so you get notified every time I upload a video. If you're wanting to help support the channel, there's links in the description box below. Thank you all. I will see you again tomorrow. Please, all of you, stay safe and stay healthy. Much love to you.